Welcome to the City of Oklahoma City Board of Adjustment meeting for April 21st, 2022, which is now called to order. The agenda documents and minutes are located at okc.primegov.com/public/portal. For anyone wishing to speak today, hopefully you've already notified staff that you intend to speak. If you are not the applicant and you intend to speak, we need you to fill out one of the white forms that's available outside if you have not done so already. If you are the applicant, you don't need to fill out one of those forms, but if you are not the applicant and you're hoping to speak, we've got these forms outside and deliver them to staff as quickly as you can. For speakers other than the applicant, please try to limit your comments to 3 minutes. If several or similar people have similar issues to raise with the board or similar protest, we ask that you designate 1 or 2 speakers to speak on behalf of the group. And then if anyone has additional comments, in addition to those comments, we'll allow you a brief opportunity to make those comments on the record. Board members will be allowed to ask questions and comments at any time throughout the proceedings. Please do not interrupt board members because it makes the record clearer and it makes the meetings go by much faster. Before you begin with your comments, please identify yourself by stating your name and your address. And this meeting is called to order. First item on the agenda is to receive the minutes from the April 7th, 2022 meeting. Do we have any changes to the minutes or a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
A motion and a second to receive the minutes from the April 7th, 2022 meeting. Once you're able to, cast your votes. And the minutes are received. Next item on the agenda, continuance requests or withdrawals. I think we have a couple.
We have 3 today. First is item 15, case 15022, defer to May 5th. And items 16 and 17, 15011 and 15016 have both been withdrawn.
Okay, we don't need a motion for withdrawals, but we need a motion for the continuance. Was anyone hoping to speak on that item that's being requested to be continued? Seeing none, I think we can take a motion.
I'll move we defer case 15022 to May 5.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to continue item 15 as requested. And that item's continued. Next item we have are items on the consent docket, and seeing none, we can move to items requiring a separate vote.
The first item for public hearing is item 1, case 14994. It's a request of Primrose Schools for a variance to the side yard setback at 1013 Northwest 13th Street.
Is that applicant present? Okay. Okay, sure. And sir, before you begin, just for the purposes of the record and just in case anyone wanted to, is there anyone that wanted to request a continuance that has not already done so? Okay. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no worries.
Sure.
Good afternoon. My name is John Fenimore. I'm with Primrose Schools. I'm their development project manager. What we're here to request is there's a setback line from the center line of Classen Avenue as well as a build 2 line from Classen. And so the setback is 65 feet from the center line, which effectively is 15 feet from our property line, and the build 2 line is 10 feet. So just by default, we can't meet both of them. And so we're requesting the variance from the build 2 line because in order to build to that line, Classen is on a diagonal. We'd have to have a diagonal wall on the side of our building. So we've selected to meet the setback line and ask for the variance on the build 2 line.
And JJ, is this just because of the purported use maybe is why this seems to be a conflict? Because it seems like they conflict, but.
The downtown district has the build 2 lines, and then several streets through the city years ago where there were special building setbacks established, Classen being one of those. They've really not been honored through the years, so
Okay.
I think the new code is going to eliminate those.
Okay, I was going to say, it's unfortunate that you have to come get a variance for that. But this is sort of a pretty archetypal case, I would think, for a variance. Sometimes people stretch a little bit, but if you literally can't meet both of the guideline code provisions,
Yeah.
then I think you're entitled to a variance.
We have to pick one, yes.
Board members, any questions or comments?
The variance amount is 3 feet. Is that correct?
I'm sorry?
The amount of the variance you're requesting is 3 feet? Is that right?
I'm sorry, I still didn't.
Is the amount of the variance that you're requesting 3 feet? I think that's
Yes.
what I read here.
Correct.
Yeah, we like
At the southwest corner of the building, as you work your way up Classen, it becomes farther because Classen is diverging from the property line.
Yeah. So the maximum variance would be 3 feet.
Right.
We just like to put a number on it sometimes, so there's clarity. Any other, did you have a comment, or?
Yeah, this project's been changed drastically, I think, from what it was, so, yeah, I applaud you for making it work.
Yeah, yeah, and only needing one variance.
Right,
so.
yeah.
Was anyone, I don't have anyone signed up to speak on this. Is anyone hoping to speak on this application other than the applicant? Okay. Seeing none, board members, questions, comments, or a motion?
I'll move approval of case number 14994 for the reasons that it meets the statutory requirements for a variance, with the variance being a maximum of 3 feet.
I'll second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the variance request in case 14994 for the reason that it meets the statutory conditions for a variance, maximum amount of 3 feet. Once you're able to, cast your votes. And it's approved. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 2 is case 15018, request an SLR 150th and Penn for a variance to the side yard setback at 15201 Layton's Court.
Good afternoon, Steve Rollins, Arc Engineering Consultants, representing the applicant. This is a self-storage facility, zoned C3 within PUD 288. There is R1 residential directly to our west. Whenever I laid out section 2 for this self-storage facility, I did not remember that there was a required 15-foot building limit line between C3 and R1 in the Oklahoma City ordinance. So building 15, as you can see on the map, is drawn 7.22 feet over that 15-foot building limit line. The plan was submitted to the Building Permit Department that way. The foundation plans were approved on November 30th. Concrete was poured for the foundation on December 2nd. So they also did not realize that the 15-foot building limit line had been crossed by the building. Concrete had been poured a few days later. We were notified of this. I believe there was one of the neighbors directly to our west that sent an email into the action department, and that's how we became aware of it. That's why we're here before you today, is to ask for a variance to this 15-foot building limit line easement. I think you've received an email of protest from this neighbor, Mr. Kennedy, and I have been in contact with him through email over the past several days. And we have come up with an agreement that he is happy with and we're happy with. If this variance is approved, we have agreed to provide 7 Canardi junipers planted on 10-foot centers along his fence line between his yard and the building that would be too close to him. So with that, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer those right now.
So what, I know we've had one protest here. Does this section that's encroaching, does that abut, I think that abuts other residential properties?
It is one building that basically backs up to Mr. Kennedy's lot. That is the main lot that's affected. Building. It's one unit that went too far over into the building limit line. That building is about 30 foot wide.
Yeah, it's right here. These are already built.
The other buildings within Phase 2 and within Phase 1 as well, they back up to a 17-foot drainage easement. So they're well outside of the 15-foot building limit line and outside of that 17-foot drainage easement. So none of them ended up being too close. It was just this building 15 that ended up being too close.
So I don't know who's operating the photos, maybe you, but they've got a photo of the actual encroachment, so if we could go to that. Yeah,
Do a photo?
yeah, in the actual photo of it.
I don't have a photo of the concrete
It's
itself.
in the-
Oh, it is, okay.
Yeah, it's in
It's
our
in the
packet.
packet. So there's that, but then there's, it actually, the framing and everything, there's a photo of that, unless that's all you have. Okay. Well, we've got it in our packet as a part of our materials, but I was going to walk through this with you by looking at the photo, but I know that you know what it looks like. So the longer, oh, is it with the protest? Okay. Do you have the protest packet uploaded? Okay. So the bulk of the section that does not encroach,
That's correct. It is, the building 15 is 30 foot deep, and that is, it encroaches 7.22 feet over the 15-foot building limit line. Right.
I'm just trying to understand in my mind how this
The shaded
sort of
area
happened.
that you see, that's concrete. That's driveway.
Sure, but I'm just trying to understand in my mind how the bulk of this does not encroach, and you constructed that in conformance with the code, and then all of a sudden, we've got this pretty substantial encroachment here, so I'm just trying to understand how that happened. When, I would think that the whole thing would encroach. I don't really understand why only a portion.
There's a 17-foot drainage easement along all of the, that's all a 17-foot drainage easement.
Oh, so you,
And I saw that.
yeah, okay.
And so the buildings, I drew them outside of there.
Yeah.
The other 15-foot building limit line, I just did not remember that it was there.
Okay, and I think I asked this earlier, but Mr. Kennedy's property is the only one that's sort of abutting this.
That's correct. It is directly to the west of Building 15.
And then you're proposing some trees that you all have agreed on that'll be site-proof.
Yes, sir.
Board members, any questions? Before we hear from, Mr. Kennedy has signed up to speak, so we'll hear from him.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from him.
But, okay, we'll hear from you in just a second.
Thank you.
So, okay, Mr. Kennedy?
Good afternoon, Theodore Kennedy, 15316 Blue Jay Drive. Imagine my surprise when I looked over my fence line, as Mr. Rollins said, and I saw they poured that concrete so close. So that's when I contacted the Action Center. And then eventually, I guess I found out that Scott Wise was aware of another email chain about the 15-foot setback being violated. So this was December, so at the end of December, I called back and I was just trying to figure out what was going on, with it. And then just went radio silent, so I didn't hear anything until, I always look at, all the permits and every variance, and I saw this variance, and I just, I was just worried that it was gonna be like rubber stamped, and, in my packet, I showed you what it looked like, so you can imagine I have this big stucco building, just like, right there. So, but working with Mr. Rollins, like he said, I'm good with the variance if it's the junipers, 7 trees, 12 foot on 10-foot centers, whatever it is to make it impervious view. And obviously I know they'll grow, but I'm fine with that. I was just initially upset that, I never got anything back from the city to say, hey, hey, we messed up too. So, we're going to recommend that the developer do a variance or not. So, but it's resolved, so I'm good with it. If the conditions of the variance are the trees.
Okay. I know there was some discussion about a difficulty in sort of guaranteeing certain trees staying alive.
Right, yeah.
And so I'm a little concerned about that. I mean, if
Yeah,
they
well, I
plant them
had
there and they
already
last a
really
couple of
mentioned
months.
Abervorte. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but Mr. Rollins got with his landscaper and said they're not really conducive to Oklahoma because of the humidity. It's more of a northeastern tree. So they represented these, so, you know, that they can handle the Oklahoma soil. I looked it up and they're pretty hardy, so, you know.
Right.
As long as when they plant the trees, they're good specimens, you know. And also, I guess if they agree, you know, if one dies, to replace it.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm worried about,
Right,
is, and the enforcement of that.
right.
And if we approved it, how we would word that to make sure that that's adhered to. So there are a lot of concerns, even if you didn't protest. Frankly, I read the application and I was a little surprised by the extent of the request here, and so I would have had a lot of questions even if you had not have protested. And then I got to your protest, and it made sense to me. I mean, you sort of buy this property not expecting something to be built that close to your property and something that respects that 15-foot easement or setback. And then you get this constructed. I mean, I guess they got approval from the city from what I'm hearing, and so maybe it's not a bad faith thing where they just built it anyway and then we're going to come back and ask for forgiveness. But in any event, it's a difficult case even without your protest, but it sounds like you guys have worked out the protest. And notwithstanding the protest, I still have issues with it because you might not own that property forever. And so I'm also thinking about the future property owners and whether they would want this there or not. And so I'm trying to protect their interest as well. So those are my general thoughts. Board members, any questions or comments for Mr. Kennedy?
Would you rather have the trees, or would you rather have the proper build line and no trees?
Well, I went back and forth with my wife on that, so
Yeah.
actually, I guess the trees would be the better choice, because they went back, you know, you still see the building, because we're saying it's like one of the biggest buildings there.
Yeah.
So with the trees being so close, I mean, you know, I guess the trees trump
No.
the
Okay.
15-foot setback.
Yeah, you'd still see some of it even if it were
Yeah. And
within the 15-foot.
if we trees dying, would that be something that could be called in on an action line, and
I think
they
we-
could pull it up and say that they're.
I would think we might, if the board's inclined to approve it, I would think that we might condition it on the size of the trees and the trees making
A wall,
this site-proof. And so it'd be site-proof screening, but not necessarily dictating the type of tree that it is, because it just needs to be site-proof. So that's all I can think of. That's even if the board's inclined to approve it. The board might want to decline the whole application. I don't know, but. Okay, do you have any other comments? Mr.
That's
Kennedy?
it.
Okay.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you for coming here today.
No problem.
And I appreciate your objection as well. It's very well worded. And I try to appreciate the interests of the neighbors, even those that don't protest. And it's not every day that we get protests that are kind of as well researched and drafted as yours. And so I appreciate that. And these are the types of things I have in mind, even when neighbors don't protest, is your type of protest. So, sure. I don't know if the applicant wanted to address any of the comments that Mr. Kennedy had? Or
I
comments
don't
of the
really
board?
have anything else to address. We did talk about a size of the tree as far as height. Whenever I spoke to our landscape guy, he said he had several trees that were 12 foot tall. So, you know, that's plus or minus some amount, but I mean, they will be somewhere in the neighborhood of about 4 foot wide, 12 foot tall, and should provide pretty good screening immediately, and then they'll grow taller from there, so.
Board members, questions, comments?
What's to keep the other neighbors from wanting trees and blocking their view?
It'll look a little weird with just a little
Yeah.
section of trees there, but, I mean, the fact that this is the only, if there were other neighbors that maybe didn't protest,
Yeah.
that were also impacted, that would be a problem. But since this is the only neighbor that has, and I tend to agree with them that trees are probably better than not having trees,
Yeah.
but a conforming building, because he's still gonna see it regardless, so maybe the trees are better. But I think a more general condition that it's subject to this 4 foot wide, at least 4 foot wide, 12 foot tall, site-proof
JJ, do you
trees.
know if was it rezoned to C3, or has it always been C3? Just curious.
It was already C3 with
Was it? Okay.
PUD 288, and it's a pretty old PUD.
All right, cool. I just wanted to make sure we weren't responsible for,
Yeah,
for doing that to them or anything.
yeah.
Good.
Old one.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments, board members? Okay. Anyone else? I don't have anyone signed up to speak. Anyone else hoping to speak on this application? Hearing none. Questions, comments, or a motion?
I'll make a motion, see where we are. To approve, where are we at? Case number 15018 for the reasons that it meets the statutory requirements for a variance.
We have the condition at all for the trees?
Yeah, oh, the trees or, yeah, what,
It's like
how are
a,
we gonna word that?
I just wrote down, and a municipal counselor can kind of confirm or deny, but minimum of 4 foot wide and 8 foot tall site-proof trees will be placed along
10-foot centers?
that west. Oh, did I say 10? Okay, 12, definitely 12,
12.
yeah. Yeah,
Everybody got that?
if I didn't
Okay,
say that, I
yes.
meant to say that.
Yes, that.
Is that a part of the motion as well?
Yes,
then?
it is.
Okay. And then, do you think that's, are you satisfied as a municipal counselor? Okay.
With that, I will second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to approve the variance request in case 15018 for the reason that it meets statutory conditions for a variance. On the condition that on the west side, there'll be a minimum of 4 foot wide and 12 foot tall site-proof trees placed on that side. Once you're able to, cast your votes. 7 trees? Well, so I tried to capture that by saying site-proof. So, okay, so however many it takes to be site-proof, it might be 10, but just so that it's site-proof. And then if it's not, you can call the action center.
So just to be clear, is this for the width of his property, or is this for, I can't even see it, where's my microphone? Is this for the width of the property, or the width of the,
Sorry?
did you all agree that this would be for the width of the property, or the width of the
I thought it was for just
construction?
the part that's
So just
not
for
in
the,
conformance,
for the
basically.
record, we want to be clear on what you all agreed to. So if it's
We agreed on 7 trees, the width of his property.
the width of the property, that's what the record will reflect, then, thank you.
Okay. But in the motion, it didn't say 7 trees, it just said site-proof, so, yeah. And it was Mr. Privett's motion, but I,
And we need to
Think-
make
Yeah,
sure
it was a little choppy.
okay. And then your second still stands? Okay, got a motion and a second, and actually, it's already been voted on, so
Voted
the
on.
application's
Good.
approved. All right, thank you.
Item 3, case 15021, application for variance to accessory building regulations located at 7225 Ridge Manor Lane.
Good afternoon. My name is Jason Landers. I'm here on behalf of Mr. Roush on the variance to have his building constructed. Was told that it was denied for a couple reasons. He has sent in paperwork to explain what his reasons was for a variance. A lot of it has to do with hardship, trying to put in basically an office for his wife who works from home, and also to cut down on cost as far as running concrete or road bed back to where the building could be.
So I don't know if you had a chance to review the staff report, but an unfavorable condition is that the encroachment of the setback is substantial. And
That's what, and I'm a personal friend. He kind of filled me in. He's out of town on some family business.
Okay.
And asked me to come up here, so I'm kind of about half wrapped into it.
Okay, all right. I appreciate you coming and representing him. That's very kind of you.
Try to take care of my friends and the family. You know, you do what you got to do.
Yeah.
I know that there is some questions on where it's at and everything. I've personally been to his property, and from where he has it drawn in on the picture above, By him putting that building right there, yes, it is very close to the dwelling, but it is also going to cut down on equipment needing to come in, amount of concrete and work to be done, because it will tie into his existing driveway.
And then, I usually ask this before the meeting, but JJ, was there a place that they could put this that wouldn't encroach so much? I mean, I guess. So that's something we normally ask, is normally if there's got to be a good reason why you can't put it somewhere.
The
so
flow
normally
of
it's a
his
river or
backyard,
a
and
creek
I
or
think he's
something.
put some stuff in here too about how the backyard kind of slopes and everything, and the amount of dirt work that it would require to get that accomplished was in question.
Yeah, the size didn't really offend me too much personally. The pitch and 250 square feet is going to be under an awning, so it's not actually part of the building anyway. It's still factored in, but we consider that. The roof pitch, that's not a substantial variance either. And then the other thing is just this part of town is sort of in a part of town that I think we give a little bit more leeway to on stuff like this. But, I mean, that encroachment is pretty large. Normally, we're looking at like a foot or two, and so this one, I think, is looking for 19 feet. It was just very substantial. So I personally didn't quite see enough in the application to tell me why we couldn't cut that down a little bit to 5 feet maybe, or I couldn't move it and make that encroachment smaller. I didn't see a lot of that in the application. But I'm also only one board member, so I don't know how the other board members felt about the application or the encroachment.
I don't think it gets to the statutory conditions as far as, I mean, to me, I don't feel like the application demonstrates an unnecessary hardship. Having to spend more money on dirt work, to me, is not unnecessary hardship. And the particularity to this particular property, I think, like Mr. Chairman said, we haven't been shown why is it so particular for this property. Can it be moved somewhere else? And then the minimum necessary to alleviate, which are the conditions that we have to meet. Is there something else that could be done where we're not granting 19 feet? If there's something maybe less than that. So,
It's true.
and I don't expect you to answer those questions, but.
Right. And so one of the, we have 4 conditions that the legislature has required us to satisfy in all these variance cases. The very last one is that the request is the minimum necessary to alleviate the hardship. So we have to find a hardship, but then we have to find that whatever's been proposed is the least amount necessary. And so normally that means, we've done as much as we can do, but we just can't do anything other than 19 feet. And this application, it might be the case that it's impossible to do anything less than 19 feet, but it didn't look like that in the application. It looked like you might be able to move it a little bit to fix that. But rather than deny the application, especially when the applicant's not here, and you're very gracefully kind of standing in front of this firing squad for him.
I'm used to it, sir.
Well, we take that into account, but I think there's not enough for me to get there yet on this application, but there's also not enough for me to deny the application, because I think if we had some more information, he might be able to move it somewhere so there's less of a variance needed, or come back and tell us there's nothing more he can do, and then we can vote on it at that point and determine what we need to do. But that's kind of where I am. I don't know where the rest of the board is, but that's kind of where I am. So board members, any other questions or comments?
I'd hate to deny this without asking, can you redraw this? Can you rework it? Does the shop have to be 40 by 40?
That one, on his square footage for that, I don't know. I know that's what he was looking at because I personally have a shop at my residence. I live in Choctaw, and he came over and looked at it, and I mean, it's perfect for what I do, but he said he needed to go a little bit bigger for what he's trying to accomplish, which, again, I'm not getting into his personal business, what he's doing in there. He might be building Christmas decorations. I don't know. But the 40 by 40, you know, I mean, it's a decent size shop. If I would go back, mine would be bigger too, just to have that little bit of extra room. I know he kind of tinkers with things, and he's got a lot of tools that he's going to store in there and maintain his vehicles and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and the size wasn't a huge component here because, again, 250 square feet is well, maybe 450, but the awning is pretty big. But if other board members want that size to come down, then, you know, he can tell us why that size can't come down or whether it can come down. But the other thing that the size does is if he shaves off a little bit of that 40 by 40, that can also reduce that 19-foot encroachment as well by a foot or two or three or however much he shaves off. So usually in these cases, the applicant or the applicant will request or the board will just continue the item to our next meeting.
Sure.
And then the applicant can kind of look at this and review our comments and rework the application to address our comments, and then a lot higher likelihood that we'd approve it when you come back or he comes back.
Okay.
So, but yeah, from what I'm hearing today, it's potentially the size, whether the size can come down. I would also, kind of similar to that point, like to know how much of the encroachment's for the awning and how much of the encroachment is the actual building structure itself. So that probably is like how it's oriented.
That one, give me a second, I might be able to answer that.
Yeah, that
one.
might be in the application, but.
There it is. So the awning itself is 15 feet, and I think that's what really crunches it in towards the house a little bit more. Because it's a 40 by 40 shop, and if I'm reading these blueprints correctly, it's got a 15-foot awning that comes off the side of that.
So which, is that on which
He
side?
sent,
On the house side then?
I do believe that is on the house side, sir.
Okay. So it would be the building that looks like that's encroaching and not the awning. But, okay. So yeah, it sounds like the size, one of the board members' concerns was the size, and see if the size could come down, and then see if it can be shifted over a little bit to minimize that 19-foot encroachment at all. And I didn't hear many other concerns, but, so yeah. It sounds like a continuance, board members, to the next meeting, which I think I heard was May 5th.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
I'll move we continue to May 5.
Second.
We've got a motion and a second to continue case 15021 to the May 5th meeting. Once you're able to, cast your votes. And that item's continued, so.
So we are pushing it to May 5th?
Yeah.
Okay. I will have that conversation with him upon his return.
All right, well, I appreciate you coming today.
Thank you. Y'all have a wonderful day.
You too.
Item 4, case 15026, request of Pennington Companies for a variance to the minimum lot width requirement at 12531 South Anderson Road.
My name's Charles Allen with Allen Engineering. This is a 30-acre tract out of, originally it was a total of 80 acres that we divided up for the owner with, I believe we had 5 5-acre tracts running along Anderson Road. 5 acres, and then these were 2 in the middle that had 150-foot frontage out on Anderson, and then 30-foot back to the west, creating 2 flag lots. They're wanting to divide the 30-acre tract in approximately half, 15-acre tracts. Really, it's probably more of a marketing position that they would like to be able to offer 2 tracts back there. Larger tracts that are 20 or plus acres are typically harder to sell in this area. I think the 5-acre tracts in front went very quickly. So, and we're in agreement with having only one drive, that have a combined drive out there. From Anderson Road, you wouldn't see any additional driveways. And then there would be a common access drive to the west tract.
I think the board knows how I typically feel about these. I'm not usually comfortable with these at the Board of Adjustment. It just seems like we're getting to the borders of what the Board of Adjustment is for, and it seemed to sort of implicate a lot of the issues from Planning Commission. But I know we've done them before in some cases, and we've declined them in some cases. So I don't know where the board is on this one, but this one seemed to be getting close to something that should be done at Planning Commission.
That's kind of what I thought. And seeing the comment about the access to the west, and, you know, that's a planning commission request for sure.
I know we can technically do these. We're not prohibited from doing these, but it just starts to make me feel uncomfortable, getting a little bit too close to Planning Commission for me personally. That's not to say that you have to file another application and pay another fee or anything like that. You can roll this fee into that application. And oftentimes the city recommends this route because it's a little bit faster. But for me, it was a little too much for the Board of Adjustment. But I've been outvoted before, so maybe the board outvotes me. Do you have any questions or comments of the applicant? Do we have we need probably a couple of comments just to take our temperature, or a motion. I would hate to deny the application because then he probably would have to pay another fee. And normally we just continue this and then have them apply at planning and roll this fee into the planning application instead of just denying the application.
I'll just say that, I mean, I kind of go back to the comments on the last application. I mean, if we're looking at these statutory standards, in the purpose of our board is to kind of grant these, you know, minimal variances or special exceptions. I mean, this is huge. And I mean, I don't see the unnecessary hardship here. I mean, I can't get there just on the statutory standards. So that's my temperature on it.
I think that just maybe a savvy lawyer in the 90s figured out that they could come here and it's a little quicker, and the board maybe approved a couple of them. And so it's nothing against your application. Just, I mean, the board has approved these in the past, but maybe the current makeup of the board's not particularly comfortable with that, myself included. I don't know that I would have been approving these. I've approved some of these in the past, but they're very simple ones and very straightforward, and it kind of made sense. But this one gets a little more complicated, and again, just gets a little bit more on planning commission issues, I think. But so with that, I don't know if you want the board to take a vote, or typically, again, we usually, if we're inclined to defer something to or refer something to planning commission, typically we grant a continuance of maybe a month or something, and then let the applicant get that process going through planning. And if for some reason they can't do that, they come back here and say planning's not an option, and then you come back here. So that's typically what we do.
And this is my ward also. So
Okay.
You can.
I'm sure
Get with
planning
me
would.
if you
I'm
want.
sure planning would approve it. I don't see anything offensive about it.
No, not really, but yeah,
Yeah.
looking at it and what could be, you know, I know what you want to do with it, but you know, what could happen otherwise is, I think, more of a concern.
Yeah. Well, and other people seeing that this was approved and coming to us, even in this area, for
Yeah.
stuff and kind of circumventing planning is just things I'm worried about. Okay. Do you think a month is long enough to?
Yes.
Okay. So continue this to the meeting. Does anyone have a calendar by chance?
Got one on your
May 19th.
computer. Click your date down there at the bottom right.
Yeah, as long as we have a meeting on that day, and it's not one of those that we skip. Okay, so we do meet on that day. Okay, so do we have a motion to continue this to May 19th?
So moved.
We have a second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Got a motion and a second to continue this application to the May 19th, 2022 meeting. Once you're able to, cast your votes. And that item's continued.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 5, case 15027, request of Jeremy Dunnington for a variance to the screening and dumpster requirements at 9515 Northwestern Avenue.
Charles Allen, Allen Engineering. Jeremy Dunnington and his son are both here in the audience. They're the owners and developers. This is a proposed office complex, I'll say, that it'll be developed in 2 or 3 phases. The first phase is a building on the north end of the property for a dental office. That's a picture of the existing ice vending machine that's there. I'm not sure if any of you all are familiar with this area. To the west is the Baptist Church parking lot, Britain Baptist Church. And when they have functions there, you can see in that picture there's a mobile rock climbing wall that they set up and somewhat use this grassy area. There's a 20-foot alley between the properties, so they'll set that up and utilize this area. The reason that we're asking to not have a site-proof fence and landscaping in this area to keep it open, there are several reasons. Probably the biggest reason is security. We feel that with a site-proof fence, this would allow people to somewhat hide in the northeast corner of the parking lot without being seen. It's also, I think, a good opportunity for graffiti in this area. And we're just trying to kind of keep this open, and it'll be an open area, grassy area between 2 parking lots, basically. As I said, Jeremy Dunnington's here. If you have any questions for him, happy to answer them, any myself.
We had some difficult cases today, because I struggled with this one as well. I don't know, maybe there's something about people hiding or something that's common in this area, but I don't know where that kind of came from. It was kind of a surprise to me. I don't know. That's a concern for me, is people hiding here. And so, and frankly, I mean, I think the whole point of this is to hide dumpsters so that people in the neighborhood and the community don't see a dumpster out there in the open. And so if you're trying to get around that, you need really good reasons. And people hiding, I don't know that for me, wasn't a compelling reason unless I hear more about that. The other thing is, I know this area is developing very quickly, and that we see all kinds of applications. I know planning sees a lot of applications from this area developing very rapidly. They're sort of all around Britain and Western trying to get a new district to develop over there. And so anything like this, for me personally, I would want kind of a temporary variance, just because the area is developing so rapidly. I don't know what it's going to look like in 10 years or 20 years. And so I would want to limit anything we approve to 10 years. But again, I couldn't get past a couple of the variances here. The site proof and security fence and landscape buffer, I didn't hear enough in the application for a variance to those. Relocating it, I think, probably makes some sense. But the other ones, I don't know that I was compelled by. Board members, questions or comments?
Well, I think even at the parking lot, we should have site-proof screening, so,
Yeah, and it's not just for the adjacent residential properties.
Right.
In the normal case, it's sort of for the whole community.
yeah, you get trash and stuff coming from parking lots and blowing into other, I just think it's good policy. And especially where the houses are currently. Or are those houses or businesses? I can't remember.
This will be adjacent to a parking lot.
Yeah, the ones on the north side of the property. North and west.
Yeah, I thought there was residential over there.
Yeah.
So again, I mean, I think there's enough there. The intention of the code is you don't have a dumpster right across from someone's fence.
Yeah, and the parking lot, is R1 too, so.
Right, that
it
could develop.
It could be a house
absolutely.
again.
Absolutely.
Without
Someone
even having to come.
could
in.
easily buy that land up and put some houses there.
Yep.
Potentially, I shouldn't say easily, but it made sense to me here. I'm with you on the location of it and not being in the 25, not having to abide by that 25-foot setback, because it is unique in that you have an alley and then a parking lot and not a residential area next door. I'm with you on there, but the rest of it, for me, I wasn't quite there on the site-proof fence and the security screening and the landscape buffer and all that. I don't know, and you might be able to speak to this, but how the landscape buffer would really work here. If you were required to put that in, I don't know, that one might need to be varied as well, because I don't know where that would go.
Well, typically, we're going to have a fence.
Right.
We have a little gas meter compound to the south of the dumpster. The dumpster will be in an enclosure itself, but it's 5 feet off the property line. So we'd be running a fence down the property line to the building line. So you're just going to see a straight fence, site-proof fence, which could be a metal R-panel fence of some sort like that. And then landscaping would be on our parking lot side. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, for the landscaping, I think I could.
I mean, we don't have a problem with, this is just the south half of the property. It's not the whole length of the property. So there will be a site-proof fence where the actual residential starts up.
Yeah.
And the dumpster will be 25 feet from the parking lot property line to the west. We're just trying to maintain it, the open appearance that it has now.
Yeah. I understand, it's not an easy case. And the security fence would be just a chain link fence, I would assume, and so people would still be able to see the dumpster there. And so, well, board members' comments? Motion?
But in the security fence, it's only going to be from the building setback line north, so it's not really going to provide any additional security. Obviously, you can just walk around it on the south side, so.
Yeah, and maybe I need a little bit more clarity, because in the zoning ordinance of the staff report, it says it cites at least to 2 code provisions that you need a variance to. Site-proof screening where it abuts residential, and the 25-foot setback from adjacent residential, and that's it. So does he need a variance for security fence and landscape buffer?
It's just a variance for the dumpster setback and to eliminate the screening and buffer on the north half of the property.
On the south half.
Excuse me, south half. I'll turn around.
And the dumpster is 25 feet from the church parking. There's a 20-foot alley and then a 5-foot strip there. So we still have the 5-foot strip there. It's just we would prefer it to be grass.
I'm okay
and
with the
open.
dumpster. It's better than being on the north side, next
Yeah,
to where people
yeah.
are actually living.
Yeah, that part of it I was okay with. But I guess I'm trying to figure out where the security fence, and maybe it's in the ordinance and I just don't see it, but the
There's
summary
site-proof
application says security fence, landscape buffer, but then when the ordinance is cited, it just says site-proof screening.
Yeah,
I think the wording is
the
site-proof
wording is, yeah,
and
the wording is
secure.
in the ordinance, site-proof and
site-proof.
security fence. But
Oh, okay.
he's just looking to eliminate the site-proof.
I'm pretty sure I copied that out of the ordinance.
Okay. Well, and I'm reading the summary as well. It might, yeah. Board members, questions, comments, motion? I don't have anyone else signed up to speak. Was anyone else hoping to speak on this application? It's not the applicant? Okay.
I can
Sorry?
make him, oh, go ahead.
That's somebody.
Did someone want to speak on this application? Okay, yeah, well, I don't have you signed up, sir, but we'll recognize you, so if you wanted to, sure. And just please introduce yourself by,
My name is Sean Sidwell. I live at 1114 Northwest 95th, so I'll be the residential building that's right directly behind him.
Okay.
That would be on the west side.
okay,
I'm just here to see if we can make sure that he gets that privacy fence up in that area, because it looks like it's going to be a protracted building project, just one in the middle, so to speak, and then two sites developed over time, and there's no timeline, et cetera. So we'd kind of like to have our neighborhood looking decent while they're in a building construction site for however long it's going to take. It looks like a couple of years.
Yeah.
There's two other sites that are being prepared, but no plans or anything else, so.
yeah.
And I know what COVID has done to us. It's
Yeah.
I had a hard time finding you,
Yeah,
actually,
yeah.
and the right entrance, so I'm sorry I'm late.
No, no,
But that's really about all I've got to say. My other neighbors, a couple of them around me say the same thing, but they didn't have time to get here, and I just got here just to speak up about us neighbors.
okay,
And we welcome the project, I mean,
yeah.
definitely, but the fencing, we care about, and the garbage, we don't.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, well, we appreciate you coming here. My understanding is, and JJ, you can confirm or deny this, but anywhere along the currently residential areas are going to have screening and everything that complies with the code.
Yes.
The only thing that it's before us, and just to clarify, sir, whatever the code requires, they're complying with in front of your properties, in front of any of the
Okay.
residential properties. The only thing that's in front of us today is that parking lot that's next to their property.
Right, that's a church parking lot.
Right.
And I would have something to mention about them. I forgot it, so thank you.
Okay.
They're talking about taking part of that parking lot, and they haven't done it with you guys yet, to make it for their outreach program for kids.
Okay.
They've got a climbing gear, and they put some other stuff.
Yeah.
So they're developing probably half of that parking lot is their proposal
Okay.
for the kids. So because the attendance at the church has fallen off enough to where they don't need it for parking anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Okay.
they'll be coming at you for that, so you might want to consider letting them do the whole back fence.
Yeah.
You know, because that's what they're going to be doing with the kids, and
Yeah, and you might have missed our comments earlier, but we were a little concerned about that because that parking lot can be developed at any point into something else. And so I'm glad you raised that because that was one of our concerns.
yeah, thank you for even reminding me, because I'd forgotten to say it.
Yeah.
But that's what Chad and the church is planning to do with it, because they've been using it already for the kids. They put up a water slide, and they had their climbing tower that they roll up for, the outreach program, and,
Yeah. Okay.
they're using it now for that.
Okay.
And just, okay, thank you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And then, sir, if you wanted to address any of the comments, you are able to.
I'm not sure exactly, was he asking for the fence or not? I'm not,
So he was concerned about fencing along what's currently residential, and there are houses there. He was concerned about fencing there. That's not before us.
Right.
From what I understand, if you needed a variance for any of that, it's not in your application. But it sounds like you don't even need a variance because you comply with the code for that,
Right.
for that stuff. And then as it concerns the parking lot portion, he sounded to me like he was advocating for a fence on that portion as well, which is kind of, I think, where the board was anyway. But having the site-proof fence on that portion as well. So
is it,
I mean, knowing that there's gonna be the development there in that parking lot, I still think, the alleyway plus 5 feet, you can still put a dumpster there, so that I'm not too concerned about that issue. The board might be, but I'm not particularly concerned. So that part of the variance request is okay, but the site-proof screening, I mean, I'm still
Yep.
not really in support of.
2 motions?
I think we could do it in one motion, if it were granted in
one?
part and denied in part.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
Jeremy Dunnington, he's
Sure.
the owner of the property.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Dunnington. I'm the owner of the property.
Okay.
My intention isn't to take the fence out permanently. It's just not do the development on that south half for now. We're focusing all of our development more in the kind of north, the middle part of the building or property. And so I'd really just, at this time, until we get the south half truly figured out as how we're developing it, take that fence out and then put it in at a later date.
How
The dumpster
long?
enclosure is going to have, and that's going to depend on economics and interest in that end of the property.
I ask because that sort of goes back to one of my earlier points, which was a potential temporal condition on this application.
Sure.
To say that something that gets approved, maybe gets approved for a period of years, and it sounds like if you're already anticipating modifying this at some point in the future, I don't know that I would be against a temporary variance based on the application as drafted, even without the fence, if it's for a shorter period of time, and that provides them some relief. I don't know that I would be against that. But again, goes to my question of how long. And so for me, it was maybe 2 or 3 years. And
That's
not
probably fine.
Okay.
You know, it's really going to depend on how quickly we can get the office built
Yeah.
and open and cash flowing. And then
Yeah.
that's going to really determine the amount of interest that we have for the other half of the property.
Okay.
And as we build that out, then when we submit for that building, the fence is going to be part of that package.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I could get on board with around 3 years, board members, sort of with as drafted, because again, I do think this area is going to develop, but I don't think it's going to develop in the next 6 months
Right.
or anything. And not to say it won't, but develop in the way I'm envisioning, where it's sort of revolutionarily different. It's just a totally different part of town. I
And
see
part of
that.
my thoughts for the original, you know, trying to delete that half out is just to increase the visibility to that site.
Okay.
We do have that ice vending machine that's on the property right now, and our tenant that actually leases that spot from us has actually had it broken into about 3 different times.
Okay.
And so I'm trying to keep as much visibility as possible on it so
Yeah.
that there's not anywhere for anybody to, you know, hide or sneak away to in the dark. And
Yeah.
putting some parking lot lights in and
Okay.
really trying to make that area nice.
Well, a shorter period of time makes sense to me, and it allows that parking lot to potentially develop over the next couple of years. And then we'll have more information as we're analyzing a request like this in the future,
Sure.
if you wanted a longer-term variance or something. So there's 3 years. I mean, that seems like the temperature of the board, but 3 years,
Yeah,
and then
that
if
should
you
be
need
fine.
longer, you can always come back. But
Okay.
okay. Board members, questions, comments, or a motion?
We didn't have any other protests.
I did not have anyone else signed up. so-
Then I move approval of both, limited to 3 years.
Do you have a second?
I'll second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the variance requests, both of them in case 15027, for the reason that they meet statutory conditions for variances for a period of 3 years. Once you're able to, cast your votes. And it's approved.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 6, case 15028, request of John Rinke for a variance on the side building setback at 704 Northwest 52nd Street. There we go.
John Ronke on behalf of Cat Shalos, the property owner.
Okay, and if you could just give us a brief overview of the request.
The request?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, this is an error on my part, and quite honestly, where we actually had a plan to build this thing, and we had initially developed it with a wider footprint, and quite by accident, I allowed my foundation to get put in the wrong spot. So, at any rate, it wasn't until I was really looking at the fascia and our finishes that it occurred to me that, man, that sure looks a lot bigger than what we had agreed on with the city. So, at any rate, so once we realized that, we put a brakes on the construction, and I spoke with my homeowner, Kat, who is present in the audience today. And she said, well, what are our options? And I said, well, we can tear it down and put it back the way we said we were going to, or we can try to go for a variance. And when I talked to her about what the variance process was and getting before you guys and talking about why we think that we probably can let this stand, we decided that it was worth the time to go for it. And because this is kind of a peculiar placement of house and property, and the way that the individual, as you can see in this particular photo that's up here right now, You can see that the properties are oriented, to be square to the curvature of the road as opposed to square to each other. So we really have quite a bit of room that exists between the properties, even as it is currently built. And overall, we don't need a lot of additional room within the 5-foot setback from the property line. And so, from a overall architectural perspective within the neighborhood, this would essentially be unnoticeable, because of the relationship of the two houses to each other, specifically this house at 708 Northwest 52nd Street. I believe that 16 foot 11 and a quarter that you see notated there at the top of the thing, that is the absolute distance between our existing stem wall and the edge of the brick corner of that house that's next door to us. So we have had one neighbor who is in the 300-foot radius approach the homeowner to say, hey, what's this about? But no one has voiced any complaints about this, in terms of what the placement is and the size of the structure. So overall, it would absolutely give us a greater amount of utility to the garage itself. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with the builds in this particular neighborhood, but the garage as it exists is an enclosed and attached garage, and the overall interior width of it is only about 10 feet. So, in terms of storage and usability for the house, it really was never functional, which is why we started the project in the first place. So, ultimately, the extra 1.5 feet that we need, that we've accidentally created, would actually provide a great deal of usability to our owner and to the value of the house in the future without negatively impacting the neighborhood. So that's pretty much the sum of it. I think we addressed pretty much all of that in the application.
Yeah, and like you said, after the notice period, you heard from someone, we don't normally see protests for a 1-foot encroachment
Right.
very often, so.
We're pretty much here just because we realized that I realized I made an error and was like, okay, we gotta go about this the right way.
Yeah, and need a clean title too, so.
Yeah, so, anyway, and I think our reasoning on this is that, the reasoning that we're asking for this is that it is I think we are asking to be considered under the hardship, because it would be substantially expensive to tear it down and, put it back the way it was, or the way it's supposed to be. So, but.
No, I understand, and sometimes that's a consideration. Here, I think it is just because the encroachment's not very substantial. As the staff report notes, the encroachment's not very substantial. I think it's peculiar, this property shape is peculiar, that neighboring property, as you mentioned, is a little bit peculiar in its orientation. And so I think you can get there primarily based on the encroachment being substantial and weighing all of this, the fact that it's already built and all that, versus tearing it down. We've had folks tear things down before, and so that's not necessarily going to prevent it, but here I think it's pretty minimal, so I can support it. Any other questions or comments, board members? Does anyone else hoping to speak on this application that's not the applicant? I don't have anyone signed up, so.
I guess we just need to confirm the actual variance. I know it says 1 foot, and he said 1.5 feet, so, can we?
It's a great point.
Zoom
Are
in
you
on
confident that it's 1 foot?
I was confident when I wrote when I wrote that. It's been a hot minute,
Okay.
So, and but the data that's on the application, I am confident in that. So,
I don't know that I would oppose 1.5 feet, even if it were 1.5 feet. So maybe just err on the side of caution.
For the record, I guess.
Approve it for 1.5 feet. It's not like you're going to rebuild it.
I think that sounds
half a foot over.
great.
Yeah. Okay. Board members, I think we're ready for a motion.
I'll move approval for variance for 1.5 feet.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the variance request in case 15028 for the reason it meets statutory conditions for a variance of 1.5 feet. Once you're able to, cast your votes. And it's approved. All right.
Well, thank you very much, guys.
All right, thank you.
Item 7, case 15014, request for special exception of Lindsey Beeman to allow home sharing at 5308 Northwest 108th Terrace.
I'm Lindsey Beeman. I have no idea what all this is about, so I'm new to all of this.
Yeah, no problem.
So,
Yeah, if you just, sort of a brief, so we have your application, we've read your application, but for the purposes of the record, just a brief kind of overview of what you're proposing to do.
okay. This is my rent house that we were wanting to turn into an Airbnb. It is a rental neighborhood, so I think this would be a great Airbnb. It's close to highways and Hefner Parkway.
This one, it looks like three rooms, maximum of 10 guests. And you said this is one of your rental properties. Do you live nearby? Are you going to be managing the property?
Yes.
Okay.
I actually live within a mile.
Okay. Did you have any other home sharing properties in the area, or?
No, I used to have one in Guthrie.
Okay.
So,
I don't have anyone signed up to speak, but board members, questions or comments of the applicant?
A favorable condition is she's kind of out in the area where there's not a whole lot of these.
Yeah, that was my observation when reviewing this, is this one, we give a little scrutiny to people because there are certain areas that have more home sharing than others, and so we have some scrutiny, but there are other areas of the city that might need an Airbnb or two, and so this one, it didn't seem like there was a lot out in that area, so that's kind of favorable of your application. Was anyone else hoping to speak on this application that's not the applicant? The last question is a period of time, and so normally we're doing kind of 2 to 3 years for a special exception. Board members, any thoughts on that or a motion that includes that?
Given this location, I thought 3 years. I didn't have a problem with this.
Sounds like a motion.
Yeah, if nobody else, I'll move approval. Ask that you advertise your self-imposed rules on Airbnb.
okay.
Limit 3 years.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the special exception in case 15014 for the reason that meets the statutory conditions for a special exception for a period of 3 years and including the self-imposed conditions stated in the application. Once you're able to, cast your votes. And it's approved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 8 is 15017, special exception of Cordell Cato to allow home sharing at 11510 North May Avenue, E304.
Good evening. My name is Cordell Cato, and I want to apologize for this. This is the first time in this setting, so I'm a bit nervous. But just like the lady said, recognize this, the location of the property is in close to a lot of restaurants, close to a lot of groceries and stuff, and I think it'd be a great property to do the same home sharing, and that's pretty much it. I would love if, I can.
So this one
Yes, sir.
is looks like it's a one apartment unit that you're trying to get for home sharing?
Correct.
Okay. And do you own the unit or?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And not that it really matters for our purposes, but there aren't any restrictions or anything?
No, sir. I've spoke to the president of the HOA. I've spoke to residents in terms of homeowners and renters. I've already committed vocally, and I can have it in writing as well if they ever have a problem moving forward. I'll comply to whatever they want to do because I don't want to, disrupt anything.
Okay. And so it sounds like you'll be managing the property then?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, this one, similar to the last one, is pretty far north, and it seemed like there's not a high density of these in that area. Especially, I don't know that I've seen one in a one-unit apartment complex, and so that, I think having some diversity of home sharing is good. So some apartments, some homes of various sizes, so I think that's good, and I don't know that I've seen a lot of these, so to me, that's favorable. I don't know about the rest of the board members. It looks like 2 rooms, and then how many people were you advertising as the maximum?
Just 2.
2 people?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I thought that was rooms. That's 2. It's a studio. Okay. And so it should be 1 car then, roughly 1 car if it's
Yes,
2
sir.
people. And there's no issues for them with parking? They don't need a parking permit or anything like that?
No.
Okay.
And there's a lot of parking available as well.
Okay. I don't have anyone else signed up. Was anyone else hoping to speak on this application? Okay. Board members, questions, comments? Or a motion?
I'm okay with this one for 3 years, so I'll make a motion to approve, advertise the self-imposed conditions that you put in your application, limit to 3 years.
Thank you.
We've got a motion and a second to approve the special exception in case 15017 for the reason it meets the statutory conditions for a special exception for a period of 3 years and including the self-imposed conditions stated in the application. Cast your votes, please. And it's approved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 9, case 15019, special exception of the Kong's Vu to allow home sharing at 4521 North Georgia.
Good afternoon. My name is Seifan Dong. I'm the wife of the applicant. So today I'm here for the application for special exception to allow home sharing of the property located at 4521 North Georgia Avenue. Do you need me to talk a little about the property?
If you could, please, especially because this is starting to get in an area that
Okay.
there's some more.
Sure. So the property has 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and 2 living rooms with 1 attached garage and 1 carport. So with the max capacity of 8 guests.
Are they going to be allowed to use the garage?
Sorry.
Are they going to be allowed to use the garage?
Yes.
Okay.
Can they sleep in the garage? We're gonna have 8 people in there.
So we do have like 1 bed in each room and 2 sleep sofas in each living room. So
I would potentially want to advertise that as a little bit less people, but board members, any questions or comments for the applicant? I don't have anyone else signed up to speak. Is anyone else hoping to speak on this application? Okay. Seeing none. Questions, comments, or motion?
I would move approval of case number 15019 for a period of 1 year with the condition that it be advertised for, would you be okay with having 6 people?
yes.
With 6 people for a period of 1 year, and including the condition that you advertise your property with the rules that you put on your application.
And we didn't have to get into this with the other applications, but just so that it's clear for you,
Yeah.
these kinds of conditions are just whatever conditions the board puts, you advertise those on Airbnb or whatever, so you would have to advertise it as a maximum of 6 people. And you'd have to advertise, no smoking, no parties, all the things you put in here. And if you don't do that or you're in violation of that, you potentially have to come back before this board if you're in violation, and we can revoke the special exception. So that's what she's talking about with these conditions.
Gotcha, sure.
Yeah, including, it specifies Facebook Marketplace on here, so, that's kind of a different animal there. So,
Right,
yeah.
right, yeah. Okay, so you said 1 year, a maximum of 6 people, and then the self-imposed conditions? Okay. Do we have a second?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to approve the special exception in case 15019 for the reason that it meets the statutory conditions for a special exception for a period of 1 year, on the condition that it's advertised as a maximum of 6 people and advertised with the self-imposed conditions stated in the application. Cast your votes, please. And it's approved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 10, case 15023, special exception to home sharing at 2920 Southwest 63rd Street.
Hello, my name is Kazi Saifullah. I apply for this board of adjustment for the home sharing. If you have any question, I will be happy to answer.
Okay. You've got the next application also, I think. You've got another application in front of us
Yes,
today?
yes.
Okay, yeah. It looks like maybe around the block.
2 blocks, yes. One is on 63rd, other one is on 61st.
Okay. And then I assume you're going to manage the properties?
Yes, me and my wife.
And then do you live nearby?
I live North Oklahoma.
Okay.
Yeah, Oklahoma
North
City.
Oklahoma City? Or?
Oklahoma City, yes.
And on the first application, this is 63rd Street. It says there's a garage. Are the guests going to be able to use that garage?
Yes, they can.
Okay. Looks like you have plenty of parking, at least in that property. Board members, any questions or comments? This applicant? I notice on the map that there's really not anything over here, so that's good. And I should mention, for the record, we get an analysis of where all the home sharing applications have been approved in the past, and so we can sort of see where these are. And so when I mentioned there aren't a lot in your area, it looks like within a few miles of you, I don't see a lot of Airbnbs, which is a good thing. So, any questions, comments? I don't have anyone else signed up to speak on this application. Was anyone hoping to speak on this application or the next application from the same applicant? Okay. Hearing none, I think we can take a motion.
I'm good with this one, and I was thinking 3 years.
Yeah, it seems similar to the ones on the north side.
So I'll move approval. Advertise your self-imposed limitations that are in the application for a limit of 3 years.
Thank you. I'll do.
I'll second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to approve the special exception in case 15023 for the reason it meets statutory conditions for special exception for a period of 3 years and advertised with the conditions stated in the application. Cast your votes, please. And that one's approved.
Thank you.
Item 11, case 15024, special exception of same applicant for home sharing at 3016 Southwest 61st Street.
Okay, and this one just looked a little bit larger.
Yes.
Four bedrooms and 8 guests.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know that I have any questions that I didn't have on the other one, other than it looks like there's less, that driveway's smaller on this one, but. Board members, any questions or comments?
Have you had a chance to speak to
Yeah, the protest. Sorry.
Larry Bowman? He's got a protest.
I didn't get it. What is this, sir?
Have you had a chance to speak to Larry Bowman? He's sent in a protest to this one.
Larry Bowman. No, she didn't tell me anything about, I don't know.
Looks like we've got a copy of that, but sometimes folks will protest via email, and it looks like someone sent in a protest via email. So we usually give the applicant an opportunity to address any of the protest concerns. So it sounds like their concern is additional traffic and potential parking issues.
But this house has, big parking space. It can, 4 cars can park all the way inside the driveway.
Yeah, I know your application, I think, said 2 cars could park in the driveway. Yeah, 2 cars can park in the driveway.
It
But
also
you're
has a
saying-
carport in the back. Not in the picture, but I have big carport, 1 car parked in the carport and 3 cars parked on the driveway. Parking, I think, is not an issue. We can take care of that. We can talk to our guests and tell them to park
Okay.
inside our parking space, no problem.
Okay. I don't know how strongly the board feels about parking issues, but we could potentially limit the number of guests instead of 8, reduce that to 6, and that'll potentially have less vehicles around. I don't have a strong opinion on that, but
And require the off-street parking advertised that way. I mean,
Okay.
because it's not currently, so.
okay, yeah. Yeah, so it sounds like the board would, instead of advertising this with an 8-guest maximum, put a 6-guest maximum.
We'll do that.
Okay. Well, it sounds like that won't be an issue then. And then,
Including on your rules that when you post on Airbnb or wherever you're renting, that they have to park in the driveway. They cannot park on the street.
Okay, we'll mention that.
I think that would alleviate the concern of the neighbor.
okay.
We'll do that.
Other than that, I didn't have a lot of concerns about this one. I'd have a lot of scrutiny if this were on 36th Street or something, but 30th Street. But here, there's not a lot out there as far as home sharing, so I don't know that we need to do anything else on this one. But I can't make a motion. So, questions, comments, or a motion?
I'll move approval of case number 15024 with the condition that you advertise the property as off-street parking only, maximum of 6 guests, and for a period of 3 years.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, got a motion and a second to approve the special exception in case 15024 for a period of 3 years for the reason that it meets the statutory conditions for a special exception, on the condition that it'll be advertised with the self-imposed conditions in the application, a maximum of 6 guests, and as off-street parking only. Cast your votes, please. And it's approved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 12, case 15025, special exception to allow home sharing at 2608 Northwest 31st Street.
Speaking of 30th and 31st Street, no.
Hello, my name is Julissa Valdez. I am asking for the special exception for the home sharing of my property located at 2608 Northwest 31st. It is a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, max occupants of 6. The garage is available for them as well. We live actually across the street, so we'll be able to manage it ourselves and keep a good eye on it. We do have, also have like a list of some of my neighbors that live both sides and across the street that have approved it also, because I want to make sure everybody's good and keep the community and the neighborhood good.
Is that your copy, or can we take a look at that?
Oh, yes.
Okay. And I'll just add it to the record, just in case.
And I know a couple of the neighbors did send in some emails supporting as well.
We did receive those.
Yeah, good. And so I recently just retired, and so I'm wanting this to be my new career, spend more time with my son, and hopefully it'll be approved.
Okay. And then it looks like this has a driveway with,
Yes, so it
not
does
a
have
sidewalk.
at least two vehicles can park in the driveway. Mhm.
okay. And then did you need this back, or do you mind if we
Oh,
keep this?
you can
Okay.
have that.
Just want to print it. Yeah, sorry. Board members, any questions or comments?
6 people in 2 rooms seems kind of like a lot of people.
So it does have 2 queen-size beds and a futon. So I can advertise it from 5 to 6, just in case they have kids, because if a kid is over the age of 2, they're considered a guest. So if it's a family with 4 kids, or 4 adults, 2 kids, you know.
My only concern with this one is this area is pretty saturated with Airbnbs already. So if we were to approve this, I would be on board with a very short period. And I noticed you have a lot of rules on here, but I didn't see anything about requiring off-street parking. Did I just miss that?
I'm sorry, say that?
In your list of rules, they're pretty long. I didn't see anything requiring your guests to park in the driveway instead of on the street. Did I miss that in here, or?
Oh, I don't have that, but that's something I can
I
definitely.
think it's actually the opposite.
Where is it? No, that's just the questions we ask. Is it available? Yeah.
Did I hear correctly that she wouldn't mind having that as a condition? Or you could,
Yes,
you
yeah,
could
I
add-
wouldn't mind.
Okay.
When they apply, this is the info that they give.
Yeah. Either way, she said we could add it, so either way.
Yeah.
And then, I sort of liked your idea earlier, Mr. Barr, of a 1 year, so for these areas that are getting saturated. Some of the applicants might not like that, probably don't like that, but for our purposes, I think that makes sense. But any other questions, comments, or a motion?
I'll make a motion. My turn. Move to approve case number 15025 for the reasons that it meets the requirements for a special exception and the conditions added of off-street parking only, and added the self-imposed rules for a period of 1 year.
We've got a motion and a second to approve the special exception in case 15025 for the reason that it meets the statutory conditions for a special exception for a period of 1 year, and on the condition to be advertised with the self-imposed conditions in the application, advertises off-street parking only. And then were there any other conditions?
I do have
That was
a
it.
question on that. When you say off-street, they have to park on the street and not the driveway?
On the driveway.
Have to park in the driveway.
On the driveway,
Oh,
not
on the
street.
driveway?
Yeah,
Okay,
not the street.
okay. I had that
Yeah,
backwards, but yes,
Sometimes that gets confused even
I was
among
gonna say,
board
I didn't
members.
want, you know, I thought it would be better.
You
I just
can
want to
put
make sure.
in the advertisement, they have to park in the driveway.
Driveway,
It's
yes.
probably clearer than saying on or off street.
Yeah.
Or
Okay.
else,
Yeah,
yeah, or
yeah.
else.
Once you're able to, cast your votes. And it's approved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 13, case 15029, request for special exception to allow home sharing at 1602 Northwest 21st Street.
Good afternoon. My name is Joseph Buendia. I'm speaking on behalf of Gina Buendia, my wife. She's on crutches currently, just had a knee surgery, so I'm going to be the one to stand up here today. So thank you for hearing me today. My wife and I purchased a property at 1602 Northwest 21st Street in Oklahoma City in 2020. It's one of our favorite areas in Oklahoma City. The 1917 home's been completely redone, and we've stayed there several occasions with our family, walked the neighborhoods, and have enjoyed it. It's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. It's got a 1-car working garage. The driveway, side-by-side cars can fit, and then 2 cars can fit behind that. It's on a corner lot, so there's street parking to the north and to the east side of the home, and so we'd like to apply for a short-term rental license for this property.
another short one.
You guys have done a great job with this property. It looks great.
Yeah, it's my wife's work. She loves designing, so.
You're not gonna take
she's
any
done a great
credit for it, or?
I don't take credit. I built the benches on the side porch that are hanging. I built those.
Okay, yeah. No, it looks great. I think, home sharing is controversial sometimes, but particularly in kind of certain areas, it's kind of controversial. But I do think there is a role for it, and I think we sort of need to show off our city in some regard. I just think it sort of needs to be in a controlled manner. So this property seems like it does that. It shows off our city, and it sort of shows our best foot forward. So I like that in that regard. As I suspect other board members will say, this area has a lot of home sharing properties already. And so if anything, I would think a shorter period of time is appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, this one's in a highly, highly concentrated area, even more so than the last. Our concern is that at some point, the neighborhood starts changing from a residential neighborhood to a hotel.
Totally understand. We specifically bought the property on a street where it's a lot of run-down homes, and so being on the corner lot and beautifying that neighborhood, we feel like we can stay on the front porch and side porch and make it a more walkable neighborhood, seems safer, and a lot of the properties around us have started kind of taking care of their lots a little bit better. So, but we enjoy that area of the city. I understand it's highly concentrated, but it's a great area. And we enjoy traveling, and we've stayed in some really great neighborhoods specifically for areas where you can go into neighborhoods and walk to restaurants and dining and entertainment, and so.
Yeah, you can take a bike from this location and go to a lot of the districts. I mean, it's a great location as far as living, but also for visitors. You're definitely kind of right in the middle of a bunch of districts. Again, I'm only one board member. I want more scrutiny on these, but I don't know that we have enough tools yet to start denying applications. I guess we do. We have that discretion, and so, but it starts getting difficult.
Make the motion.
Well, I can't make a motion, but
I can.
someone can make a motion, and
Be it first.
yeah, it could. And at some point, it'll have to start, but I don't know that. I will say, at some point, I would also like to go make an update and a report to City Council and have them modify this ordinance. And so I was actually going to talk to the municipal councilor at the end of the meeting about doing that. And once that happens, ideally we get some more tools to start denying or at least regulating some of these applications. But until then, I don't know that, it seems a little arbitrary to just start picking random applications to deny these. And also the municipal councilor would have issues potentially defending some of these decisions. And so for that reason, I would want some strict conditions and a short time limit, but I don't know that I can just sort of get on board with arbitrarily denying certain applications. So, but I'm only one board member, and I could be easily outvoted by the rest of the board. So, was anyone else hoping to speak on this application other than the applicant? Do you have any questions or comments for the applicant, board members, or a motion? Again, I can get on board for a year with this. But
That's what I was thinking. So I'll move approval, advertise the self-imposed conditions that you put in the application, limit to 1 year.
And would we want to do, this says off-streets available, would we want to condition it on off-street parking only?
Off-street parking only.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we have a second? Okay, we've got a motion and a second to approve the special exception in case 15029 for the reason it meets statutory conditions for a special exception for a period of 1 year, including the self-imposed conditions in the application, and as modified by saying off-street parking only in all of your advertisements. Once you're able to, cast your votes. And it's approved.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Item 14 is case 15015, appeal of William White of the denial by the Historic Preservation Commission of a certificate of appropriateness to install rock landscape, French drain, and landscape edging at 416, 418 Northwest 30th Street.
understand. Thank you.
Good morning, or good afternoon. It just feels like we've been here a while. William White, 3200 North Harvey Parkway, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, 73118. I'll try to simplify this. There are two issues, both related to water. One is way too much water, and one is I want to avoid watering. So we have the landscape edge and the French drain. That was previously approved by the HPCA under 00118 in 2020.
Is that in this material you just gave us?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
If you, 200018.
Yep.
There's a tab for that.
So approved July 27th, 2020.
Yep. Right.
The same things that ultimately were not approved were
We had
approved.
5 items, 4 were reapproved, and the landscape edge and French drain were denied.
But they were initially approved on July 7th, 2020.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Okay.
The first one was a consent agenda approval, right?
Yeah, it was a consent agenda item.
Mm-hmm.
It was unanimous. It was administratively approved.
Yeah.
Was that because the neighbor didn't protest or what?
I have no idea.
Okay.
That'd
But
be
it was
staff's decision to make it
administratively
consent.
approved. It was uncontested.
Yeah.
We went forward, and if we could go to, under the standards and appeal, I think that'll help. The first red tab, the timeline. So we received our permits, we received approval in August. We signed contracts, we had permits, we have fence permits, we had plumbing permits for this installation. We had landscape purchases and landscape contracts. And I received a lawsuit for adverse possession and it slowed us up.
Oh, that was another thing. Was that decided?
That's still pending from what I saw on the docket.
Correct.
Yeah.
The judge has stated that gross encroachments that she previously removed, I had the same right. If I'm found to be encroaching, she can remove them. I'll move them just as she moved hers.
Okay.
So if we go to the tab to understand what maybe the dispute, maybe that helps you. The yellow tab is a photograph prior to my purchase. And it shows the fence attached to the corner of the duplex and the driveway poured under the awning. And Cindy, I'm sorry that or whoever's trying to keep up. So those gross encroachments were removed. The majority of them were removed after we were ready to complete the project, and I was sued for adverse possession. So the property line may have been in dispute. I could have proceeded, but I didn't. In speaking with Katie and Angela, the administrative approved things are normally always upheld and approved. In our research of every denied second filing, we've never found an administratively approved one to be denied. And so I want to just go through simply what we're trying to do today. You go to the second tab under 00118. And I think there's some miscommunication, and we want to be sure, I want to be sure you understand what we're trying to do. In the second tab under 0118, you can see the red tab, the gross encroachments have been removed. In fact, they removed the encroachments in the easement on the city property or on their line. So what we came up with and why we're here is that the stormwater runoff was calculated to be around going from 300 gallons for a 15-minute max event to almost 3,000 gallons for a max event. And it flooded the property. It flooded the structure, it flooded underneath the duplex, and it supersaturated the soils. Jim Hassenbeck is our architect of record. They came up with a great solution. The fence, what I'm trying to ask for today is to put the landscape edge only under the fence. Fence has been approved. So we just want to put an 8-inch landscape edge under the fence.
I guess I need some clarification on that because I don't know that the edge was necessarily on appeal unless it's a part of the rock landscaping.
No, it's on appeal.
Okay.
It's been denied. Specifically denied.
Okay, so I thought it was the rock.
That's a separate issue.
Okay, so we've got the
we have-
rock.
and then we have decorative rock,
Yeah.
and we have a landscape edge.
Okay, and then, okay. I guess I just wanted some clarity on that, but, and then the landscape edge, that's the kind of 6-inch rock that's probably,
It goes right underneath the fence.
right, and it's going to, once the fence is up, unless it's already up, but.
Well, no, the fence isn't up.
And some of the
I'm
photos
waiting
were-
for this.
Okay. And so, I guess walk me through that, because at HP, it seemed like one of the concerns of your neighbor was they could based on that landscape edge, they could no longer use that driveway sort of effectively. But it seems like the fence has already been approved, and it would be the same problem that they would have.
Exactly. It's a 6-foot fence.
Okay, and so how does the adverse possession lawsuit relate to that fence?
Well, if the location changes, then I'll need to move my fence.
Okay, okay. I thought maybe that issue got somehow resolved in a way that wasn't clear to me.
I wish.
But, okay, and so depending on how the adverse possession lawsuit shakes out, that could move this whole issue, at least concerning the fence and that landscape edge.
Right,
Okay.
but the judge has allowed me to, if I have an encroachment, I'll move the encroachment just as she has removed her encroachment.
Right, okay.
So we want to do two things, which were denied. The landscape edge underneath the fence, exactly where the fence is going only, and an underground French drain was denied.
Yeah.
From our architects and engineers, the French drain would be the backup in case of a major flooding event.
Yeah. I watched the proceedings. Why was the French drain denied?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I
Never
elected
really got
not to
that.
dispute it, really.
I didn't see any commentary on it, and maybe it was as a result of prior proceedings that they were privy to that I was not, or I just didn't watch or something, but I didn't see any sort of reasoning for, at least in the HP meeting that's currently being appealed, I didn't see any discussion of the French drain at all, so I'm not really sure why that was denied. And it might have been in the application, maybe the staff recommended denial.
The new application, or the new dated application, was exactly as the previous application.
And was there any rationale in that staff report at HP for why the French drain should not be approved?
Not that I recall.
Okay. I was just trying to get my head around that, but okay.
And
I know they had to approve or deny the last meeting.
Right.
So, it's.
Yeah.
So under the 00118 tab, you see the gross encroachments that were removed, or a majority of them anyway. The fence only goes to 6 foot from the edge of the property. That's as far as the landscape edging is going to go. That seems to be quite a misunderstanding, in my opinion, from staff and my adjoining neighbor. So it's only under the fence. If you'll continue on the photographs, of, on my tab, which I presented to you, it shows that she acknowledges and admits to the flooding with her barrels or trying to catch the rainwater. But the problem is 3,000 gallons, 30-gallon barrels aren't going to help in a major
Yeah,
event.
I didn't see that as necessarily an acknowledgement of the flooding, though. I mean, maybe she's just collecting free water to water her plants.
It wasn't there until after the information was given to her.
It could be, it could not be, I don't know, but, okay.
Actually, I think she stated that.
That was
Yeah,
why?
That she,
Yeah.
in one of her letters.
I know a lot of people just prefer watering their
Yeah,
plants
well,
with
that
that water.
too. It's good for two things, but
Yeah.
I'm interested in the amount of concrete in that neighbor's backyard has a bigger effect on this property, I would say.
And that's the calculation. On her HPCA permit in 17, I believe it's 00056, she went from 3,084 square feet of grass that she shows in her permit to less than 500 square feet. So we've accelerated the runoff, and prior to putting in the temporary edging, that is, those photographs under that second one are the flood photographs.
So is this for a parking lot that's back there?
No,
For the commercial?
yeah, I guess she's got a parking lot. I've never seen any cars parked back there, but she has a, entertainment area, maybe basketball court, I don't know.
Okay.
So it even floods, that's what, I want to put in the snow photograph. On a snow melt, I get flooded. Very slow, it still floods. That's how much water is coming off. So our goal, the simplest solution that the team came up with was just to put an edge underneath the fence, which basically retains the water on the driveway and forces it to the front.
So what about the rolled curb that they proposed? What about the rolled curb that they proposed that you could still get some tires over and you could still use the driveway?
Now, I don't think she understood the drawings. I just want the edging under the fence, and then we'll look at the decorative rock, which I think is a separate issue.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to put a fence there, I don't know that it makes a difference whether it's a rolled curb or this
It doesn't.
larger thing you're going to put up, but or that you have up. But I was just curious if the fence is omitted and you had a rolled curb, maybe that's a compromise between the parties.
Correct.
But okay.
But for me, there's no delta. There's no difference. There's no. If the fence is going in.
Yeah, and it's your right, but I mean, if it ends a bunch of litigation, maybe it's worth it. But I don't know. That's not before us.
Right. This is the applications before.
Right. Right.
Rolled curbs and gutters would definitely get it.
Yeah.
But,
So
is that HP allowed or
right?
not?
Right.
So
And so we feel like our goal is to protect the property. It's not to impose on anyone. It's to protect the property. We have civil engineers, architects that came up with a very simple design that works. And you saw the letter of support, hopefully, from my neighbor to the east. Yeah. Not only is she flooding me, she's flooding the neighbor to the east, and this temporary installation has stopped her flooding. She can walk to her car without water up to her ankles. So it's been a very positive thing. That's item one.
Yep.
Item two is the decorative rock.
Oh, I'm sorry. Before you move on to that one, it sounds like, well, no, this is the decorative rock issue, so I'll wait until you're done, and then I might have some questions.
Okay.
Okay.
So the decorative rock, studio, white, we used standards and guidelines dated October 22nd, 2019. Those guidelines are extremely specific. They allow in an alternate yard to use decorative rocks. If you stand in the front yard of this property, I can see 3 decorative rocks examples from my front yard, but this one's being denied. We don't feel like it should have ever had to been submitted, because when we put in the rock or planning to put in the rock under the October 22nd, 2019 guidelines, there was no requirement. But I received a citation, was told by HPCA I had to submit. I don't think that's the correct interpretation. Obviously, they felt the same way, because in August of 2021, they changed that section to be more specific and to include front yards.
So they took the position that you're not necessarily grandfathered in under their interpretation. You never should have had it there in the first place.
Well, but I purchased the rock and I installed the rock prior to their change.
Right.
I don't want to, sorry, I'm Katie Fernald, I'm staff of the HB Commission, and I'll wait till the end of the presentation to provide some information on HP, but I want to say there's been no change to the guidelines since 2019, and that change was limited specifically to small cell installations. So there may have been some miscommunication, or perhaps there was some discussion of how things were being interpreted that evolved, but there's been no change to the language in the HP Commission's guidelines and regulations regarding anything having to do with Mr. White's application. So,
Okay, maybe I'm incorrect, but I think I read this correctly under 2.7, maintenance, actions that do not require review. The red tab, actions that do not require review. An alternate to turf and yards is drought-tolerant landscaping. And under drought-tolerant landscaping are decorative rocks. Just as my neighbors within 300 feet of my front porch have done. I don't even think I should have been required to submit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious procedurally. I mean, I guess we can handle it on appeal here, but it seems like the cleanest way to deal with it would have been appealing the requirement at the time, whenever you got the citation. I don't know, but I guess we're here now, so maybe we can resolve it here as well. So what of their position that their interpretation was this was for smaller areas, not necessarily the whole yard, but just for smaller areas here and there?
Well, they had the opportunity to define it that way. My neighbors have much greater areas than I have. So they always had the opportunity to define what decorative rock and what that percentage of the yard could be. They weren't specific. We made a very reasonable interpretation of the documentations.
Okay.
The green tab, the color photo, I think is one of the problems that I saw on the protest letter or whatever I read, that there's obviously a huge misunderstanding. If you look at the line I drew for each of you, it's the green tab in the back. That is where the fence stops. That's where the fence stops. That's where the edging that she has complained about. Yeah, keep going.
I don't know.
So under where it says concrete drive, do you see that little line right there? That's basically where the fence stops. That's where the edge stops. But what's more important for me is the misinterpretation of that rock. My designer and surveyor, if you see the elevation 1167 on the drawing, that elevation goes all the way across. We're going to raise that up to match her elevation. That's always been our presentation. We're going to raise it up to match the elevations of the adjoining properties.
So does that mean you're going to take the rocks out to raise it?
It was interesting. Yeah, we're going to raise them up. We want to keep the rock. There was some concern about the elevation, so we're willing to raise them up to that elevation. When I made my application under 00182, they wanted me to raise it up. I said, okay. They wanted me to remove the rock down the driveway. Well, it was never supposed to be there anyway. That rock is supposed to be for the planting beds, as you see, and it also increases the elevation. So from a point 6 feet back from the corner of the house to the street, all those are to be taken out and put around the planting beds. And it coincides with our design on that green tab.
So you've got these examples of other rock landscaping
Yes.
throughout, and it does look like most of these, other than that, I think it's a gallery over there on 2721 North Walker, but all of these other than that, it looks like it's a part of the front lawn, but not the entire front lawn.
Well, let's look at the yellow tab one. Let's look at 3114 North Hudson. At the bottom of the page.
Yeah.
That's 300 feet from my front porch.
Okay, yeah. So according to HP, that would be non-compliant.
That would be non-compliant.
Unless they got a variance or something, but, okay.
And then if 501 Northwest 30th, that's at Walker and 30th Street.
Yeah.
He's using, I used the same rock he used. I liked them.
Okay. Board members, do you have questions or comments? Okay. Do you have any other comments, sir, before we hear from Ms. Fertile? And we'll bring you back up.
If you have any technical or specific questions, Jim's here.
Okay. Well, Ms. Fertile, you wanted to have a couple of comments?
Thank you. So I'll just clarify a couple of things to the extent that I can, and then I'm happy to try to answer questions. The landscape edge and French drain were administratively approved, so it didn't go to the HP Commission at all. Staff approved that. A French drain in and of itself doesn't even require a CA, but often that's accompanied by some other landscape feature. People put in a gravel bed or landscape edge, just as Mr. White had proposed, so we just kind of grouped them together to indicate that it's all approved hand in hand. The format in which it was approved was to serve as an edge to a bed of decorative gravel that would be over the French drain and that would stop at the front wall of the house. What was installed, and you'll see that if you've got the pictures from the HP Commission, I'm sorry, I have no voice, is that the landscape edge actually extends all the way down beyond the front wall of the house and all the way down out into the right-of-way beyond the sidewalk. Now, the applicant has indicated that that's not the final design and that's not the final plan, but when the item came back to the commission, what essentially happened is it was approved in one version. What got installed didn't match what was approved. I believe by the time we figured out the path forward, the original CA had expired, so instead of handling that as a revision to that CA, we added it on to the second application that was still active. That's why you have 20-00118 and 20-00182 with similar items. This application has gone on longer than is typical for HP Commission, so there's some shuffling around of items that's not typical for us, and it makes it a little bit confusing. But it came back to the commission as it had been installed, with the landscape edge coming all the way forward of the sidewalk, and that's what they looked at, and that's what they ultimately denied.
Okay.
If it were to be installed as proposed, where it stops at the front wall of the house, then I believe that that's consistent with the administrative approval. I believe that we wouldn't need any further review of that, or perhaps we would administratively approve the removal of what's been installed forward of that point.
Okay. Yeah, and I think I acknowledge that the procedural posture of the case, at least in front of HP, was, I think the introductory comments were, this can be worked out a little bit more, but we're out of continuances, so we've got to vote today. So this could have been something that could have been cleaned up, but
yes.
If they were allowed to have more continuances, but they didn't. But as the board, we're hearing this de novo, and we can modify, we can do whatever we want, so, okay.
And then on as far as the rock, I think the main thing for staff and for the commission that was a concern was not only the decorative rock, but that it was clear that the topography of the site had been altered as part of the installation of the rock. You can see, looking at photos of the building, that there are about 4 bricks, so 12 to 16 inches of the front facade of the building that are exposed, that used to be below grade, and that tells you how much earth had been removed in leveling out the front yard. Our guidelines do have permissive language about using decorative rock as part of a landscape. I read that to mean, as you said, as part of the landscape, not as the entire landscape, but I can certainly see where someone could interpret it the other way. But we do have very clear language about not altering the topography of the site, not removing the slope of yards, et cetera. So that was, I believe, for staff, that was the main concern with that installation.
But what about raising it up, as he's talking about doing?
So I think the intent is to raise it back up to where it was.
Hold on just a second. No, hold on just a second, because we'll be here all day if we go back and forth. So if you could conclude, and then.
So if the slope of the yard was put back as it was before, and if the decorative rock is installed in such a way that it's permeable, it's not just like you've entirely paved the front yard,
right.
Then I think that would have been more tolerable to the guidelines and to the commission.
But they intend to raise it, I think I heard 6 inches or something. So is that back to where it was? It doesn't seem like that would be back to where it was.
We've never really gotten dimensions on all of that because we didn't review the rock.
Yeah.
It was done with the understanding that it didn't require review. So that's just something that we would have to confer with the applicant on.
Okay.
As to how high they're going to raise it and what's the appropriate height to restore it to.
Sounds like the dirt work probably needed review though, right?
Yes,
Just
typically if someone
Yeah.
wants to take out a retaining wall, put in a retaining wall, modify the slope or the grade of a site, that's something that we review. Usually that's something we review as part of another project, but if you were doing it for no other reason than just to level out the yard, that's something that would require review.
And I think that we can take new evidence on de novo review, so it's fine, but I don't recall any of this in at least the prior hearing. It might have been in hearings before that, but the one immediately prior, I don't recall hearing any of this.
I watched both of them. They talked about it, yeah.
Removing the earth?
Right, and bringing it up. And,
Okay, that must have been from the one before then. Okay.
I'm with it. If you're taking out the rocks to bring up, try to make it compliant as possible at that point.
Yeah.
Maybe some grass and, a little bit of rock.
So, but adding 6 inches to that, where does that put it as far as being in compliance?
Yeah, I couldn't tell you, depending on what the grade was to begin with.
Right. Okay.
But I agree with Katie, you can see it at that porch.
Okay.
How the dirt was sitting at
So that makes more sense. It wasn't just the fact that rock was used, or just the fact that it was all rock instead of partial rock. It was also that it was some land was moved around and that needed prior approval. Okay. Any other comments?
That's all I can think of, so, but
Okay.
just happy to answer questions as you guys go along.
Board members, any questions of Ms. Friddle? Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
I'd like to have a rebuttal, please.
Sure.
If you'll go to the first tab, the yellow sticker. This is the property prior to my purchase. Please note that the driveway is about, in our survey, 4.5 inches higher than the adjoining soil. Item 1. Also, we are not putting in a retaining wall. We're putting in a landscape edge underneath the fence.
How far is that going to go? I mean, I know you mentioned it earlier, but just for clarity.
The landscape edge, the fence goes, which is approved, 6 feet going south and north from the edge of the property. So the house, it'll be 6 feet back from the corner of the house. From the street, from the street side, the fence will be 6 feet back.
Okay, so it won't be flush with the front end of the house?
No.
Okay, because that's
No.
what I think she was mentioning, probably would be in compliance if it were.
And I think, please hear what our application is exactly as we requested in 118. What happened is our work was stopped because we got sued. We never had an HPCA review or review of the final installation.
Yeah,
We never got there.
But you must understand, when you start getting into litigation and opposition, there's a higher level of scrutiny that's put on
Correct, and I
everything.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
I truly do.
Yeah.
And then the final thing is, if you'll note the green tab on the very back, I just want to go through it one more time. The green tab on the very back. We have taken our adjoining property owners' grades and we're going to raise it to match those. We're going to raise it higher than the driveway was. Right now, in that first photograph I showed you, the ground was lower than the edge of the driveway. We plan on matching the edge of the driveway and raising it up. What happened, why the French drain is important to me is we have 65 feet, 2 foot wide, 3 feet deep, 180 cubic feet of dirt that I'm going to put in the front yard. That was our means and methods. To facilitate raising the front yard, we put the stone down, this is during COVID, we put the stone down to be sure we had enough. And we had to take delivery or we would lose it. That's where all this came from.
And why does the whole thing need to be stone? I mean, other than a design choice?
There is not enough room to put in a landscape irrigation, and the rock is an alternative yard. The front grass area is in the right of way, and it's just gonna be brown or whatever it's gonna be.
You got a hose?
Well,
I was
actually,
thinking
the hose bib is on the opposite corner.
Yeah.
So it's, and I am gone a lot. This is, so it would not be taken care of properly.
Yeah. I'm assuming it'll be a rental or something. I'm assuming it'll be a rental or something, or?
It's for personal enjoyment. I have 4 children, 28 to 35, and it's nice to have them away from me when they're in town, and they can come in at 3 a.m. from Paseo. And right now, it's just personal enjoyment.
Okay. Well, I mean, if you've got tenants, I wouldn't expect them to water it either, so that might.
My expectation is that the
Yeah.
tenants wouldn't take care of it either.
Yeah, but from HP's perspective, I mean, HP's interests don't necessarily have to align with yours. They have their own interest to look out for, so I appreciate that as well.
But our goal was to hire an excellent architect, an excellent engineer, and provide a quality product.
Board members, any questions or comments? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. To get my comments out there, I mean, clearly there's a lot that's gone on in this case before it came to us. But from my perspective, obviously there are things we don't know about. There are things that happened that, again, this has gone on for a long time, it looks like. So, but I think our review is pretty narrow. I think that these guidelines, for our purposes, I think the guideline that is applicable here for at least the rock issue could be clearer. And I tend to agree with the appellant. If the city's going to take the position that it actually means a certain percentage of the front lawn needs to be, or is allowed to be rock, then, decorative rock, then the guidelines should actually say that. But I mean, if someone, whether they're exploiting an ambiguity or whatever, it's on the city to change that if they want to change that. And I don't know that we need to come and retroactively as a board impart language that isn't in the guideline. And
Particularly since there's other properties in the vicinity that have either all or significant amount covered with rock as well.
Right. Yeah, and so that tips in their favor. I from a design perspective, I don't know. I know that this has its benefits other alternatives have its benefits, you know, that kind of thing. So it doesn't offend me necessarily, but for our purposes on appeal, I think that the guidelines should be clearer if the city wants to enforce it, as saying you can't have the whole portion being dedicated to this decorative rock. So that part, I tend to agree with the applicant. Again, there are other issues that probably took place, like moving the earth around that shouldn't have been done and that kind of stuff. But when I'm just looking at the guideline and whether this is in line with the guideline, it seems like it probably is. So I understand where HP is coming from on that, but for our purposes, I tend to side with the applicant. The other, let me make sure we're hitting all the issues on appeal. I think we do need to address the rock edging issue as well. And so I don't know how what the board thinks about that or how far that's allowed to extend, but you know, given that he's allowed to have a fence there anyway, that's already been approved, didn't really make a lot of sense to me that what the difference is there between a fence and the rock edge. As long as, I mean, again, I don't really, yeah, either way. I was gonna say, depending on where the fence is on top of that, if it's maybe inside or outside, if it's on the property line or inside, but it really doesn't make a difference to me. So I tend to agree with him on that rock landscape issue as well. That's difficult, and maybe if we were on HP and we were seeing this originally, it might be a little bit different because we could navigate the interest of the neighbors and the applicant and address those at the same time. But now that it's already there, he owns the property, he's allowed to have this there. I don't know that we can come after the fact and say, well, you shouldn't have this there, even though you have a fence there. So there was that issue as well. And then finally, as I started with, I didn't see really anything on the French drain at HP Commission for why this was denied. There might be reasons, but I don't see it on the record. And Mike, unless there was something at the first meeting that you saw on the French drain.
Unless it was connected to one of the other.
Yeah, I didn't see anything. And frankly, it seems like a good solution to a difficult problem.
Yeah,
French
I'd
drain
say more French drain the better.
Yeah.
You know, it's not visible and it does its thing.
So, I mean, for that reason, I would think we would reverse the decision in full, with the only modification potentially being the length of that rock edging, and maybe it doesn't protrude so far because, as Mr. Riddle said, if it terminates with the front of the house, they're probably in compliance. And so the real issue is the amount that it extends beyond the front of the house. So I don't know what the board feels about that, but those are kind of my views right now. And I welcome any other comments.
Katie Scottson. I am here in the capacity of legal counsel for this board, but I am also legal counsel for Historic Preservation Commission. And I have thoughts, but they will be expressed by staff
Well,
for the historic.
Go ahead.
Nope, I can't because I'm representing this board.
I was, as you know, we always have kind of an odd coordination after, if something gets overturned by Board of Adjustment, but they still need a CA. Staff's request would just be to have specific direction on whether you want that retaining wall, that landscape edge to align with the fence, which was approved to meet specific guidelines for fence placement. And we have an application that says that it will. We have an installed product that doesn't.
Okay.
So to
what is
clarify that what doesn't meet that requirement be removed,
Okay.
so that it's brought into compliance. That's one of the challenges with this site, is that it's work that's already been done.
Okay.
So you might have an application that says, this is what I plan to do, but what we're looking at on the ground doesn't match that. So making sure that it's modified to match what was actually supposed to be there.
So the fence that's been approved, where does that terminate from?
I think it's 6 feet back from the front wall of the house.
Okay, and so as long as the rock landscape
stops there,
the rock edge stops there.
Mhm.
Okay, that's kind of what I had in mind from your design. Is
Right, that's what I thought.
That's exactly what's in the application.
Okay, okay.
Again, we were temporarily stopped. We were stopped.
I'm sorry, could you get your comments on the microphone just so they're in the record? And I'll also ask, is that the current configuration?
Yeah, are
that
they
it's
still there
The current
today?
configuration is not the end product.
Okay, and so
The landscape edge will stop at the fence 6 feet back from the corner of the property.
Okay, okay.
And the rock that's on the edge, as it's shown on that landscape from Golden Survey, that will be seamless. The rock will be at the same height as the concrete.
Okay. And the other thing is, you know, your representations here, even though the raising it up issue is not really in front of us right now, your representations here in front of this board are a reason that we're approving or denying an application. And so we'll take your word that that's going to happen.
Well, if you look at the last application, at the green one, that survey is for final elevations. And that shows that I'm going to raise it up and match the driveway perfectly.
Okay.
So I would just say that that requires a CA and hasn't been applied for or reviewed.
Okay.
So that would be another opportunity for us to hopefully get everybody on the same page with HP and with the applicant to address that.
I'm not comfortable as a board, as this board, at least right now, even addressing that issue, really. If it needs a CA, it needs a CA, and it would go back in front of HP. And so, by that I mean, in our order, I don't think we need to say you need to raise it up or it needs to be at this height or any of that stuff. And then that's on you. If you need a CA, then you get a CA. Okay. So that's kind of where I'm on that issue. And then, Ms. Farrell, did you have other comments?
So, well, I guess just my only other comment is that, yes, there's the one guideline that says the landscape rock is allowed, but there's lots of other guidelines that say altering the topography of the site, altering the character of the property in the district, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, are not allowed. The HP Commission doesn't pick and choose which guidelines. We have to look at all of them collectively.
Okay.
So we will definitely go back to the table and look at making that language more clear about the landscape rock. But leveling out the yard, changing the topography of the yard, exposing previously unexposed portions of a historic building is a concern for staff.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, and so I would agree that that's an issue, but I think he needs to be, his application needed to have been denied on that basis. And so I'm not sure, and that might be an issue, that probably will be an issue when you go and try to get a CA on this other issue. But it's not really before us right now.
Correct.
And so again, this was my issue to begin with my comments. All that's before us is whether you can have the full front lawn as rock, not the height of it or whether you altered the grade or anything like that. And so if that is an issue and they deny you on that basis, you can come back here or comply with what they say to do or whatever. But what I'm envisioning is a very narrow issue that we're determining, and it's whether he can have rock on the whole yard or not. And I think he can. Personally, I could be outvoted, but I think he can. So does that kind of make sense?
It does.
It's not clean, but it's not a clean case.
The slope of the yard, the alteration of the topography was addressed in the commission's findings. It was addressed in the staff report. I guess we didn't call that out as a separate item because we saw that as hand in hand with installing a rock landscape. So we didn't realize that we needed to itemize, alter front landscape via introduction of rock required. So in my mind, that goes hand in hand with the work that was done in order to install the rock.
Okay, well maybe this is the way to deal with it. It sounds like he's going to need a CA regardless. And so I think this issue can get resolved whenever he gets his CA, wouldn't it? Like in the future.
Well, as long as you approve my rock location, and that's approved, but I feel like I'm getting a second and third shot from the HPCA, and I'd hope to gotten a final approval today to continue on.
Yeah, but if you're going to raise it
I'm going to meet what's exactly in that submittal.
Right, which requires raising it.
Correct.
And for that, she's saying you have to go back in front of HP.
Not if you approve and deny the 10182.
That's the discussion that we're having, I think.
Yeah.
So as counsel for the Board of Adjustment, I would call your attention to the summary on the back of page 4 of the staff report that gives you guidance on what to review regarding an appeal from HP, the standard that you should use.
Well, again, we interpreted it differently. I appreciate their viewpoint.
Okay. And then which section are you pointing to?
Specifically, it does say that you're limited to the issues and evidence presented to and decided by the commission and the grounds specified in the notice of appeal.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful. And so, and Ms. Friddle's saying it might be included, this height issue and altering the slope might be included in our materials, or it might not be. I guess that's for us to determine as a board, but, okay. Any other comments or?
Okay, well, I guess he has to come back and the applicant will have to get a CA to raise the slope of the yard. But I'm not understanding that there's anything that actually requires him to do that if they decide they don't want to raise the slope of the yard and they just want to leave it as is. I know that's their intention.
Right.
But
I think it would be that from the city's perspective, he would be in violation of the code or these guidelines or whatever it would be because he altered that.
Okay.
He would be in violation. And that's a different violation than what I understood as before the board, which is using rock on the whole front yard. And so sort of what I envisioned but didn't say is if he doesn't do anything, he's still in violation.
Okay.
And then it would need to go to HP. And if he raises it, he would need to go in front of HP. So either way, you'd have to go in front of HP unless we as a board, for whatever reason, said it's okay as rendered or if it's okay if you raise it. I don't think we have the authority to say that personally. And so I wasn't going to address that issue. But well, that's what the municipal councilor just pointed out, is we're limited to the issues on appeal as stated in the notice of appeal. And we can make a determination that that issue was included, the height and all that was included. I don't know that it was. I don't understand it to be, but I could be swayed otherwise. But I don't know that it was. So all I'm comfortable approving right now would be the use of the decorative rock. In general, not necessarily the height or where it's located, not where it's located, but the height and altering the grade and all that kind of stuff. I'm not making any determination on that issue. Questions or comments? Take the board's temperature on where everyone is.
For flooding issues, it would make sense to raise it up, if we're not gonna put a drain there, but, you know.
Well, he'll have a drain, I mean, potentially, that French drain, so.
Yeah, if there's a French drain there.
Yeah.
Is it gonna be front yard and backyard, French drain? Yeah. Okay.
All the way down the side, that's the main thing.
Yeah, perfect. That should work.
Yeah, and again, from my perspective, you would still need to go to HP on altering the front yard to accommodate for that rock, one way or the other. But the rest of it, I think we can address. So, where does everyone fall on this? Or do we just have a motion? And also, we need some specificity in any motion on the landscape edge / fence issue, which as drafted, I believe is 6 feet off the front of the house is where it would terminate. So I think any motion or anything would need to include that. Questions, comments, motion?
Okay, let's see if I can get this correct. I would move that this Board of Adjustment grant the applicant's appeal in case number 15015. Let me find my language. And, sorry, where is his specific ask?
I was going off the very first summary of the case number. So on page 1, very top, he's asking for installing the decorative rock landscape, the French drain, and the landscape edging. So I saw it as 3 parts.
3 parts, yeah. Okay. So I would move that we grant the applicant's appeal in case number 15015, specifically granting the request made in subparagraph 1 of the appeal, installation of the landscape edge with gravel, not to extend beyond the front of the house, the house line.
6 feet from the front.
6 feet from the front of the house. And include his request to include the French drain and where's the rock one?
landscape edge, I
lan-
guess, yeah.
Did I already say that one? Yeah, landscape edge, French drain, and the rock, decorative rock.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Did somebody write that down? So so
Our
we got it for
counselor
the
did.
record.
I'll repeat what I
Counselor
what I
did.
understand it to be, and
I think that's somebody's job around here.
then I'll confirm with the movement and municipal counselor after I repeat it. But yeah,
See what you get on the.
did we have a second?
I'll second it.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got a motion and a second to accept the appeal, reverse the decision of the HP Commission in this case on the issues of the decorative rock landscape, the French drain, and the landscape edging. The landscape edging issue limited to align with the fence as rendered in the application, terminating 6 feet off the edge of the front of the house. Is that clear enough? Okay. And then from your perspective?
Yes.
Okay. Once you're able to, cast your votes.
So you say all three, or were you taking them separately?
All three, just the entire appeal.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, and the appeal's reversed. Thank you. Oh, okay. Okay, I think that terminates the items requiring separate vote. Additional items, seeing none. Communications and board reports, seeing none. Citizens to be heard, seeing none. Other business, as I mentioned during one of the presentations, I anticipate presenting the home sharing issue in front of City Council in some respect. So if anyone wants to join me in that or anything. Okay, but I think we just need to force the issue and get it on their agenda one way or the other. So, no, yeah, I don't.
All Airbnbs are now located in Ward 4. We'll take them all.
Yeah. Seeing no other business, we are adjourned.